right, welcome everyone to the Sideline chat for the Houston Dynamo and Dash Science of Soccer STEM program. My name is Daren Heaton with Science of Sport, and today we're talking about nutrition and have two amazing guests with us that work for the Houston Dynamo. First, we have Adam Lundqvist, who is a speedy young left back that joined the Dynamo in 2018. And he is an elite athlete to make sure that he fuels his body for peak performance on the field. And the other is Brett Singer with the Houston Dynamo, who is an elite dietitian that helps athletes with foods to eat off the field. Welcome to the Sideline chat, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for joining. And the goal for this program really is to bring awareness to youth about all of the different types of jobs that are available within the sports world, and to get an opportunity to hear from professional soccer players on some of their expertise about the game and the mindset that goes into that help them become an elite athlete. So first, let's start with Adam. Love to know, where are you originally from, and when did you start to think that, you can make soccer your job?
Yeah, so originally I'm from Sweden, a very small city, just an hour south of the capital. So, growing up where I'm from, it was really not much to do. So I was trying every different sport I could. And, my dad was a big hockey player, so he wanted me to play hockey, but I'm a little too small to play hockey, so I ended up playing soccer. And it wasn't until I was maybe 10 or 11 years old when I actually kind of figured out by myself that, wait a minute, I'm way much better at this soccer thing than the hockey thing. So I started to wait, this could actually, I should just focus on this. But then to figure out that I could do it for a living, I didn't figure that out until I was maybe 18 years old, I would say. I was doing it because I enjoyed it, because I saw it as the funniest thing that I could do. I've been a football or soccer fan ever since I was 4 years old. So for me, I just saw it as just the funniest thing I could do. And then when I was 18, it kind of, developed into this, wait, I can actually make money of this and do this as a living. And I just kept working hard, and I've been very fortunate to be working with this ever since.
That's awesome. And how many Swedish meatballs would you say you eat in a year?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I absolutely love Swedish meatballs. So I know it's very stereotypical, but I love them. My grandmother used to make them, and I don't know what she put in them. I've tried to, I've asked her a million times because I've tried to learn the recipe. Doesn't never work out. It's never as good as hers. So no, but I would say because we eat them on every holiday. So we have, the big holidays in Sweden is Easter. Then we have something we call Midsummer, where we celebrate the longest day of the year, which is my favorite holiday. We eat it together with that, and then also for Christmas, of course. So I would say I eat about, close to 100, 200 maybe. 200
That's
meatballs
impressive.
for sure. 200 meatballs. No questions.
Are you familiar that IKEA sells Swedish meatballs?
Oh yeah.
You're MIA, that's where you're at?
Yes. If you can't find me, there's a pretty good chance that I'm sitting there eating my meatballs.
That's great. Well, let's bring in Brett Singer, as we had mentioned that he's the sports dietitian for the team. So where did you go to school, and how did you first realize that you had this love for the science behind fueling your body, and which are the right and wrong foods to eat, and how it can potentially make an impact on these athletes?
Let's see. I went to probably started getting interested in nutrition around high school. So similar to Adam, I played soccer growing up, And probably similar to Adam, around the age of 18, I realized I wasn't going to be able to do that professionally. So I realized I was going to have to find another avenue. And it was around that time I started to read about nutrition in magazines and online and things like that. And I took an undergraduate course at TCU for it. So I took a college class on it, and I liked it. And I realized that a lot of stuff I had read in magazines was actually wrong and maybe not all that accurate. And so I started to dive in a bit more, take a few more classes in it, and then realized around that time, more and more dietitians were starting to work with professional teams and college programs, and realized there was a potential avenue to work in the field. So I started working in a hospital for a few years after I graduated from school, and worked more in a clinical setting, and then eventually started to work more in a sports setting where I'd work with individual athletes, and then transitioned into working in more team settings like I do with the Dynamo now.
That's great. And just generally speaking, why is nutrition such an important piece for soccer players to consider when they're training or even playing games?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, winning or losing a game is a pretty big deal within the league and within any sport. And so you can train really, really well, but I think all athletes can probably think back to a time either in their childhood or as a professional athlete where maybe they didn't play very well or felt sick to their stomach or became dehydrated or whatever it might be, where they didn't perform their best. So that even though they did everything possible as far as their training, it was maybe one bad meal or one thing they could have done a little bit differently as far as their eating habits leading up to a game that could have made or changed the results of how they played. So nutrition can play a wide variety of roles, but that's in its simplest form. What we eat before a game may not make us an elite athlete, but it can turn an elite athlete into a very average one if they don't eat the right types of things. So it can make a pretty significant impact.
What's your take on the consumption of the Swedish meatball intake for Adam?
That sounds fantastic. I would encourage every one of the guys on the team to eat the foods that they love to eat. Obviously within his history, he likes that food, and culturally he loves that food, and family history wise he does. So I would be all for it.
Absolutely right. You're correct.
When I always think about these different food types, and whether it be meatballs, whether it be pizza, I think that oftentimes you forget like the ingredients that go into them. So if we just stick with meatball, for instance, like what are some of those key ingredients that are within that, and are there certain things that provide more value in a meatball compared to a pizza?
So I'll be honest, I don't know all the components or properties of a
shocking. That's shocking. You should really know. You should write this down, because I'll tell you if you don't know.
I don't. All I know is meat. I know that.
Yeah, that one's clear.
No, I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I would say maybe meatballs is not either the healthiest type of food. Like I remember, like I said, my grandmother has the recipe. It involves a lot of butter. So when you fry them in the pan, there's a lot of butter involved. And I know Brett don't really like that. And he tells us all the time that you maybe should think about something else than just butter, because it's a lot of fat, but it tastes very well. But the key components are basically ground beef, and then you have eggs, salt, pepper, mix it up together, and then you have, I think it's what you call it. It's I don't find the word for it, but it's something you mix with a little cream, so it kind of binds the ground beef together, and then you have onions also, and then you roll them into the balls, and then you fry them in the pan with a lot of butter. So now you know. So I hope you wrote it down now. So
you should have been in the kitchen.
Yes.
Yeah. Knowing with that, then there's protein within the meatball, which can be quite helpful for strength and muscle. And then there's sodium in there, which may not be useful at all times in all scenarios, but for an athlete like Adam, he's going to sweat quite a bit. And when you sweat, we lose quite a bit of sodium within our sweat. And so higher sodium foods can be helpful at times for elite level athletes. And then onion also has its own individual properties, just like any other vegetable or fruit has its own nutrients and vitamin mineral profile. That could be pretty beneficial. And then also you have to think about the psychological standpoint too. If Adam did not have Swedish meatballs in his life, that might make him feel a little sad or upset, and perhaps
I would have been miserable.
Performance.
Miserable.
Right. So there's all sorts of different components beyond just the individual ingredients within the food, but each of them have their own role and their own potential benefits.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, and really the reasoning why I mention it, because every kid, every adult has their favorite food, and it's important really to understand what it is that's actually going into that, and how is it impacting you on a day-to-day basis. Regardless if you're playing in a soccer match or in the classroom trying to understand a math topic. And so just, helping us understand, why it's important, and understanding what's going in the food is really that kind of key component to what we're talking about today. So, it'd be good to talk a little bit more about what are some of the foods that a typical soccer player eats prior to a game or maybe the day of. And then also for you, Brett, like, what is a typical amount of calorie burned over the course of a game that a typical player has?
Yeah. So as far as the day-to-day of what a guy or a soccer player in general would want to consume on the day of a match, it is going to vary from person to person and culturally, depending on what types of foods that they prefer to have or maybe grew up having. But more often than not, we're going to want to consume more foods that are what we call carbohydrate based, or in other words, more foods that come from the grain groups or the fruits or starchy vegetables. So things like rices or pastas or breads, cereals, oats, things like apples or oranges or any other type of fruit. Or our starchy vegetables would be things like potatoes or peas or corn. Those are foods that contain a number of carbohydrate based or contain plenty of carbohydrates. And that's going to be your primary energy source during a match. So you're going to want to typically consume quite a bit of those leading up to a game. As far as the amount of energy burned within a match, typically you'll see as much as 4,000 calories burned over the course of a day on the day of a game. So whereas some athletes may need closer to 3,000 or a little less on maybe a typical training day, they may need as much as 4,000 or even a bit more than that on a typical match day, because of the distance that they're covering within the day and the amount of energy that they're expending. So their energy needs are quite high on a game day, but also their appetite sometimes isn't all that great on a game day either. So it can be challenging to get enough energy, because some guys don't like to eat very much before or right after a game, because their appetite just isn't what it normally would be because of either nerves or how much work they put into a match.
Bro, you talked about distance, and what comes to mind for me is like, what is a typical amount of miles that you're running in the course of a match, Adam? Like, do you have that data?
I think I have. I don't have. I don't really. I'm like I said, I'm from Sweden, so we talk kilometers, and the metric systems. And I'm not really sure, but Brett, could you help me out? Do you know? Do you have any idea?
10,
how much it is?
10 to 11K would be for positioning the Adam. It's going to be, and depends on the weather too. So if it's really, really hot, and depends on the style of play. But if you
10
take
to 11K, how much is that in miles?
So that's a little over 6 miles in a match.
Oh, yeah. 6 miles. Yeah. So I would say if Brett says 6 miles, then it's 6 miles.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good amount, right? Like you think about, running just 6 miles and you come after that run, you're really hungry. And, I for one have ran some half marathons, and I remember going into those, it was carb load. And I would love to, hear your thoughts about, how carbs impact your fuel and provide you with energy. But let's take a short clip to watch and understand, a little bit more information on what carbs and fats and proteins are. So let's take a look at the video. Now let's take a look at the food that you consume on a daily basis in hopes we'll be able to understand our calorie consumption. But first, we need to understand the different definitions for calories, proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. First, a calorie. A calorie is the amount of food having an energy-producing value. Second, a protein. A protein is a nutrient found in food and is crucial to grow, maintain, and replace the tissues in our bodies. Our muscles, organs, and immune systems are mostly made of proteins. Third, carbohydrates. The primary role for a carbohydrate is to provide your body with enough energy, mainly for your brain and your nervous system. Fourth, fats. Fats are actually an important part of a healthy diet, but it's important that it's the right kind of fat. Those that are found in lean meats, fish, and heart-healthy oils. Now that you have some more information about nutrition, let's take a look at what you consume on a daily basis. You think about all the different carbs that we're consuming over the day-to-day basis. What are some of those that are healthy and not so healthy?
So I typically try not to, I wouldn't necessarily categorize them as healthy or not healthy. And I try to be cautious with the way we would phrase it, but more so what I'll do is looking at carbohydrates. What are some of the benefits each of them bring within it? And so that's where you brought up the question within like individual ingredients within a meatball, right? So for one, typically what I'm looking for is carbohydrates that contain different items or different benefits within them. So some of our carbohydrates may be more fibrous, which can be really helpful for gastrointestinal health. And so those would be things like fruits and starchy vegetables and whole grains. Carbohydrates in and around a game might be different from what you might do on a day-to-day basis. So you brought up the joke of Swedish fish earlier, or you brought up, or when we think about a sports drink or gummies or things like that, maybe in the context of would I do a sports drink or drink a sports drink all day, every day? Probably not, because there's not a ton of value within it as far as some of the nutrients that it provides. But a sports drink might be really, really helpful right before a match or during a match because it's really simple to digest and absorb and it converts to energy. Versus something like a sweet potato is a really nutrient-dense, fiber-rich vegetable, but wouldn't be the best option to consume at halftime. So you won't see Adam walking off the field with a sweet potato in his hand because that's not going to be a very valuable source at that moment because it's just too slow to digest and may not be converted to energy very readily. So the context matters of what you would do and when. But typically what I want to focus on majority of the time is whole grains and fruits and starchy vegetables as our sources of carbohydrate-rich foods as much as we can, because they tend to be quite nutrient-dense, meaning they contain lots of vitamins and minerals, and also very fiber-rich as well, which is very helpful for our overall health.
That's great. Adam, what do you eat during halftime? Or do you eat anything?
Yeah, I do. Actually, since I started working with Brett, I have increased a lot. Like I was one of those guys that Brett said that didn't really like to eat that much. I think for me, I'm always nervous before I play. So I kind of have an anxious stomach. So for me, there was a problem. And also with my position, I run a lot. So I need to consume a lot of food and a lot of energy. So for me, I actually have improved my eating habits a lot. So, but I usually eat, to get down to the question, I usually have one of those very, I don't know if you can say strong, but it's a energy drink that Brett mixes up for us, especially for halftime, which I think it's a lot of carbohydrates in that. And also I have half a banana, but then also before the game starts, I have what we have is like an energy gel. It's one of those you just rip off and you just basically squeeze and you swallow it. And it's also contains a lot of carbohydrates. And then I'll have a little kind of a fruit bar, I would say. It's called an energy cake. And it's what it's called, what it says on the package, but it's also very rich with only carbohydrates because that's basically all we need that close to the game in order to give us more energy.
That's a lot more than I was thinking.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was to change like from not eating anything, basically just drinking water, into eating all that, it took me a while, but now it feels like I have so much more energy, and you rarely see me get a cramp or something like that, or complain about being fatigued at the end of the games, because I think because of what I'm eating. Because during the games, before I was much worse, and I would feel very, very tired at the end of games. Now I feel a lot stronger. So, and also it helped, like Brett said, it's not the easiest thing to maybe eat a sweet potato or something like that, but those little things you can find out for what you like. But for me, it helped a lot to just eat something that was easy to consume and that actually tastes a little bit like kind of candy, like those energy cakes. Is really, really good. I wish you guys could try them, but they're amazing. So eating them and you kind of feel good about it, it's nice.
You think about the youth, let's just say elementary, middle school soccer players, what are some ways that they can start to be more conscious of this, and maybe some various food types that they could have, on their halftime to help kind of replenish them and give them every thing that they need to continue the game out and be performing at their highest ability?
I think it depends on the age range and the age group of the athlete and what level that athlete is at. So I do think, an athlete that's in the latter years of high school would be different from maybe an athlete that's 6 or 8 or 10 years old. But I think a great starting place, and this is all the way up to the professional ranks, is a banana at halftime or pre-match. So Adam will do a banana a lot of times at halftime, and I will say probably about half of our team will do a banana at halftime or pregame. Other ones are little mandarin oranges, or those little cutie oranges that you can easily peel and have in a matter of minutes. That would be a great option that you could have either pregame or at halftime. And then the last one would be something as simple as like a granola bar. Would be something that would be simple enough to have either at halftime or prior to a game. The big thing for me is at that age, a lot of times, again, kids can be nervous, just like professional athletes can be nervous. And sometimes they'll choose to skip eating before a game because they're unsure or uncomfortable with having something. But the good thing is to get into the practice and habit of having something before your games, and trialing foods out before practices. So that way you can identify what works well for you during games. So Adam didn't try those things out during an actual professional game to start off with. He tried those things in training sessions. He tried those things in scrimmages or practice games, and then tested it out and realized what worked well for him, and then started to implement it in the actual games themselves. So it's the same thing for kids. Try practicing eating different things before your practices with your team, and then try to put that into action for the games themselves also.
Yeah, experiment with some of those healthy foods to see how it impacts you on the field. That's great. Well, I wanted to transition a little bit more towards technology, to start to understand what are some of those technology devices or ways technology is being used now to help track your nutrition and what you're eating. Is there anything that comes to mind for either of you?
For me, I mean, just thinking about what you said there, is all the different machines they have nowadays for measuring your body fat, which is we use consistently, and we use it before the season starts, or we can also use it in mid-season to see if you're eating healthy enough, or if you need to change something, and if maybe you're eating well, but you can eat better, like all that stuff. And that's the thing that comes to mind as a technology thing. I think there's different ways to measure body fat, but the thing we have is called a bod pod, if I'm right. But it just seems, for me, it seems very technological. I've never seen something like that before, and it's pretty cool. It looks like, I don't know if you guys can show this, but it looks like you're going in like a space shuttle almost. You sit down and you're like all strapped in, and then I don't know how it works. Brett might tell you, but that thing comes to mind when we're speaking about nutrition.
There's a couple of tools. I think one would be, as Adam mentioned, there's ways that we can track body composition, or in other words, we can show maybe how much muscle mass an athlete is building or gaining over time. And And there's different tools that you can use to measure that. And we use the bod pod in the past is what Adam mentioned. Other tests that we'll do, we use hydration testing. So guys will actually go to the bathroom. They'll give a urine sample or a pee sample in a small little cup, and we can use a digital measurement to help track how hydrated they are. And so that tells us, have they drank enough fluids in the day, or are they maybe not drinking enough fluids? Especially when it's really hot outside in Houston, that's a good test for us to track and see and observe how guys are doing with their hydration status. And we also use a scale too, just to monitor how much sweat guys are losing. Professional soccer players lose a lot of sweat during training sessions, and that helps tell us about how much water do they need to drink after a training session. So we'll monitor their weight before and after training sessions to see how much sweat that they've lost in a given day. There are tools out there that you can use to track how much or what types of foods individuals are eating, but they can be fairly challenging and tedious. They take a lot of time to do. And so that's not something that any of our guys currently do on a consistent basis. A lot of times we're together. So I see them eat breakfast and lunch. And so if they have questions about those types of meals, then we can have the opportunity to sit down together and look at what a meal should look like and how it should be formed for each individual athlete. But I don't push them to track or monitor individually what they're consuming on a day-to-day basis. They have enough things to worry about as it is in their life. And so trying to track every detail of what they consume is just that much more effort and time to worry about. So those are some of the basic tools we use right now. And then we work heavily with sports science on their side of things to kind of monitor what that looks like in terms of how it's being put into action, into performance on the field.
Yeah. So are you wearing the vest over the course of the game? What's the name of those?
So it depends on the brand, but they're GPS vests. Basically, they help measure and monitor the distance covered and high speed running and all sorts of things like that, which would be way over my head because that's more of the sports science side of things, and I'm more on the nutrition side of things. So that's another avenue.
Do you know if it gives calories?
So it does not track calories, and that would be difficult to do with that. They could maybe estimate it, but there's no way that they would be able to measure that. And in order to measure calories burned or expended during a match, you would have to do one of two things. Either you'd have to be wearing some sort of metabolic cart, which is not really possible during a match because you have to be running, or there's another tool that's very, very expensive and is used in labs called doubly labeled water, where they'll drink a beverage and they can monitor how much energy expenditure takes place over the course of a week. So the limited research that we have in soccer players and calories burned is based on a few studies where they use that tool. And they measured just how many calories were burned over the course of a day as opposed to a match specifically.
Got it. Yeah, because I wear a Garmin and it's tracking my calories as well. I wasn't sure if there was anything similar to that in which you're able to wear.
No, not highly accurate. So there's definitely tools like Garmin's and wristwatches and things like that have it, but they're not necessarily perfect by any means either. And so no, in the case some of those tools might have that ability, but it's not something we're monitoring right now, at the very least, is what I would say.
Got it. Well, I got some closing questions for each of you, and so Brett, we'll just continue with you for now. What sort of advice would you like to give to students who are looking to monitor their food intake and just understand the basics of it all?
I would say that the easiest starting points, and again, this would be from high school to college to professional to elementary school. We teach these same basic concepts for all of our athletes. And I would say, for one, try and make sure that you're getting at least 4 feedings a day. So you're eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner and a snack of some sort. Try to make sure that you're getting a source of protein in each of your meals, a source of grains or starchy vegetables in each of your meals, and a source of color into each of your meals. So if we can knock out those or check off those 3 boxes in each meal, then we're doing really well. So we want to have a protein, a color, and some sort of grain or starch, then we're doing really well in creating a comprehensive performance plate. And that's a really simple starting point that most athletes even professional athletes aren't always doing on a consistent basis.
That's great. A nice, well-rounded plate with all sorts of different colors and nutritional value that will tie into it. That's excellent. And so, last question, Adam. You were talking a little bit about your pregame routine and how you still get nerves and there's a little bit of anxiousness, within yourself, even as a professional soccer player. So, as a kid, a student, somebody that is, really kind of trying to understand it all, how the mind, how what I put in my body really helps impact, my performance on the field. Is there anything from the mindset standpoint that helps you kind of center yourself, bring you back, and get into a place to perform on the field?
Yeah, I think what I've been learning over the years is that when I was younger, when I just started playing, I was getting nervous, and I think a lot of the nerves was because I was thinking about others' opinions and worrying about other things that I couldn't really do anything about or I couldn't impact. So I think growing older and more experienced, I've been learning myself to focus on the things that I could truly impact on the field and also off the field, and that helps me to kind of get into the right mindset to not worry about things that I have no control over. And doing that has really, I think, balanced me out a little bit, because before I could be very nervous about stuff that could be happening, that could in fact impact the game or whatever, what people think of me and all that stuff. So now I kind of just, like I said, focus on what can I control, what in my close environment can I do, and then that really does it for me. It helps me a lot to keep myself calm and just focus on the task at hand and just do the next thing, that's coming. Like, always focus on the next thing. What happens in the past has happened, and just focus on looking forward. And I think that's would be my thing that I do.
That's excellent advice, and really appreciate you both for joining today, and everyone that was able to watch, and hopefully that everyone that was watching is able to understand, how nutrition can help you become a better athlete, whether it be on the soccer pitch, and how hard work really helps, whether that be in the gym or in the kitchen. So what I say is, Adam, you deserve a Swedish meatball. So treat yourself today, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun.
Yeah, thank you, Brett, as well. And I look forward to catching everyone next time, and have a great day. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.